It's 9 p.m. Do you know where your key fob is?
Good evening, I'm Nate Benson. Pete Gallivan is off tonight. On the agenda, we continue our series talking to the candidates for Buffalo Mayor. Republican candidate James Gardner is in the chair tonight, pitching his vision for the Queen City. Can he be the first Republican in a generation to be the chief executive of the city? On the agenda starts right now. Thanks for capping off your week with me. Republican candidate James Gardner is mostly funding his own campaign for mayor. According to recent campaign disclosures, he donated more than $100,000 of his own money to his own campaign. And he faces an uphill battle if he wants to be the first Republican mayor elected in Buffalo since Chester Kowal was elected in November 1961. Gardner is a former assistant district attorney in Erie County. He unsuccessfully ran for district attorney last year, and now he's sharing his vision for Buffalo as voters head to the polls for the race to City Hall. We're going to jump right into it. City Hall has had this perception of corruption, favoritism, whether it be with developers, preferred businesses, whatever you want to call it. If you were elected, how would you change that narrative inside City Hall?
Look, it's not just a perception. The only reason I'm running against Sean Ryan is because a backroom deal got cut between him and the Democratic Party chair who wants Sean Ryan's state Senate seat. That's what the voters of Buffalo have seen time and time again. It's this handoff between machine politicians to run city government. In my lifetime, I've only known 3 mayors. 3 mayors in 40 years. That alone is a problem. It's why certain neighborhoods are completely neglected. That's why our services are the way they are. There's been no attempt at accountability. And the reason that that is allowed to happen is because we've had one-party rule in this city for 60 years. It has to stop. The only way to stop it is for people to begin to change the way they vote. And one of the things that I'm most proud about this campaign is that they're going to get a true choice this November. They're going to have the option to say, we're not going to do business as usual anymore, and that is fundamental to Buffalo's turnaround, I think.
We've seen some fundamental shifts in downtown in recent years. Pre-COVID, downtown was very different than it is today, and we have not seen people come back post-COVID, whether it be the workforce, the restaurant scene, the bar scene, whatever you want to call it. What plan do you have to attract people back downtown if you were elected?
Sure. The way I look at it is it's a two-pronged problem. There's a short-term and a long-term component. The first short-term component is there's a public safety problem in downtown Buffalo. There's and there's certainly, at the very least, the perception of a public safety problem in downtown Buffalo. People aren't going to come down here if they don't feel safe. They're not going to come down for the restaurants. They're not going to come down for the shows. And if the Sabres aren't good, they're not going to come down at all. And that is the most elemental thing that, as a city, we need to address. We need to see a visible commitment to public safety from City Hall. That's the only way that people are going to have confidence to come down here and to enjoy themselves and avail themselves of all of the wonderful opportunities that downtown Buffalo has. The second part is a long-term thing. What we have in the city, downtown core, is a lack of housing, a lack of diverse housing. We have a good backstop of affordable housing units, whether they're rental, usually rental units in the downtown area, and we have some very high-end real estate. What we don't have is that middle, and that's something that, as mayor, I look forward to working to resolve, because it's that middle part that is really going to be able to drive the economic engine of downtown Buffalo, both in terms of, visiting the bars and the restaurants, but also our workforce. If people enjoy living in downtown Buffalo, they're going to enjoy working in downtown Buffalo. And if they enjoy working in downtown Buffalo, they're going to want to live here. That's something that we have to get behind. So it's two big things. You have to address the public safety problem, and you have to address the housing problem.
Since you mentioned the Sabres, do you have a plan to make them better?
I can only tilt at so many windmills, okay. Right?
Fair enough. Obviously, to a serious question, though, the crime, as you just mentioned, downtown, while the data does seem like it's trending low. Quality of life crime is a very big concern for folks. What is your public safety plan to address quality of life issue crime in the city?
Right. So this is something that in every corner of the city I've heard. The number one issue at every block club, at every community meeting I've been, is public safety. It's car thefts, break-ins, car poppings, the overall feeling of unease and the lack of perceived safety in our city. That is very, very real, and it has to be addressed. The first thing that I would do, as somebody who comes from a background in public safety and the criminal justice system, is one, I think when it comes to the Buffalo Police Department, we have to raise our standards. And what I mean by that is we need to raise the admission standards of new police officers. Right now, if you have a GED and you're 19 years old, you can be a Buffalo police officer. That's not cutting it. We need a minimum of a 2-year degree before we give a young individual a gun and a shield and say, use your best judgment to keep our community safe. The second thing that we need to do is really is sort of move forward with this, this problem of residential burglaries, car poppings, and car thefts. And right now, the Buffalo Police Department can't pursue a stolen car, and judges can't hold the people who have stolen the car. So they can't catch them and they can't keep them. That is a fundamental problem with our criminal justice system. We need to change that, at least in the short term, to allow the Buffalo police officers to do their jobs. The third thing that we need to do is again, dealing with the short-term burglary, car theft problem is, and I mentioned this in a press conference that you covered a couple weeks ago, is it's a region-wide problem. We have to really get into and network with our surrounding suburban departments, because oftentimes criminals are stealing cars in the suburbs and driving them into the city, or they're stealing things out of the city and selling them out in the suburbs. It's a regional problem. We need a regional solution to fix it.
All right, I thought that was a good place to take a quick break so you can get yourself a fresh cream soda this week. We'll be back right after this, but first, a look at the weekend weather. Another downtown issue, long neglected, long abandoned properties, AM&As, a neglected, strip near the old Main Place Mall. You're seeing just a lot of empty, vacant space down there. How can you address that and institute, enough changes to bring those all back to life?
Sure. So those are obviously three very different pieces of property individually, and they speak to sort of a larger problem. One, you have the Main Place Mall, which is privately owned. The office building is a functional office tower. The mall space is underutilized, and I think a lot of that is underutilized is because it's very difficult to run a business downtown right now, and it's gotten even in my career it's gotten harder and harder. You see fewer and fewer businesses. The Main Place Mall is sort of indicative of the economic stagnation that we're seeing in downtown Buffalo. The vacant lot is, that is also privately owned. And, when you drive by it, I always think for the moment, it'd make a lovely passive park. But again, it gets to someone's paying taxes on that parcel of land, and they haven't found a good use for it. And the reason they haven't found a good use for it is because downtown Buffalo isn't a very friendly place to invest right now. And that's something that we need to address. Obviously, we can talk about the public safety component, but it's also making City Hall generally a better place, a better partner for private businesses. And then you have the AM&A situation. The AM&A situation is probably the easiest one of the three to fix, because that's a piece of land, even though it's in private hands, it has been lit up like a Christmas tree on all kinds of violations. And what is astounding to me is the city of Buffalo, for whatever reason, hasn't taken the necessary steps to assert itself into the legal proceedings that are currently unfolding as it relates to those pieces of property. So we heard earlier this week of how there was some reporting about how the city of Buffalo has done almost nothing to address the unpaid housing court fines that get assessed. If the city isn't serious about collecting on housing court fines, why would a property owner be serious about curing the issue? Secondly, we have ample tools in the city code and charter right now, and one of the most powerful tools available is a nuisance designation. And when you get into a situation where a property becomes blighted, and I would argue that that's exactly what AM&A's is, it's a blighted property, that has become a public nuisance. If you look at the statute that's on the books right now, it usually deals with drug dealing and drug homes. The same standards could apply to blighted pieces of property, blighted buildings. And I would advocate for including blight as a public nuisance. And I would, if a piece of property becomes, whether it's a house in your neighborhood, that one house that's always a problem, or if it's a commercial building, or if it's something as big as AM&A's, when I'm mayor, we're going to take immediate action to address it. And if it needs be, we're going to slap a city board on it, declare it a public nuisance, and you're going to see me in housing court.
Shifting back to Buffalo Police for a moment, obviously, they've got their hands full dealing with crime, but on the flip side of that, on top of your public safety plan, what would be your plan to ensure there's proper police oversight and accountability within the police department?
Sure. We live in an age now where it's never been easier to hold police officers accountable, and that's in the sense that everybody in the Buffalo Police Department now has to wear or at least patrol officers have to wear body camera footage. Ultimately, as mayor, I'm personally responsible for the officers that I employ. The accountability begins and ends with me. That being said, the availability of that body camera footage, in my experience, both as a prosecutor and as a judge, or not a judge, working for a judge. I don't want to give myself a promotion. Working for a judge. What I've seen body camera footage do is exonerate 99% of all the claims of police brutality or police misconduct. And in those one cases where a police officer does something wrong, exceeds their authority, does something illegal, you have a record of it. It is in this day and age, that is the greatest possible tool to assure that the Buffalo Police Department remains a department filled with professionals, as I know they are.
Looking at the economics of the city for a moment, Buffalo remains one of the poorest cities of its size in the nation. It hasn't gotten better in recent decades. When Byron Brown took office, it was a top 5 poorest cities, and when he left office, it was still a top 5 poorest city. What would be your plan to address that decades-old problem?
Sure, and this is a problem that afflicts lots of cities. Buffalo's not alone here. And believe me, if there was some silver bullet that could solve this problem, with all the time and money that we've thrown at it as a country, surely we would have found it by now. What I'll do as mayor is work with all the available stakeholders to help address this issue, from the federal government all the way down to Buffalo Public Schools, and all schools actually, because I think all of those different stakeholders have something to offer in the solution of generational poverty. Two things that I think are vitally important as mayor and are going to be priorities of mine is, one, the construction of new housing. There's no greater way to defeat generational poverty than providing people the opportunity to own their own home, to have an asset to pass down, one, for stable living, and two, to have an asset that they can pass down to their children. It does two things. It lifts them out of that poverty, breaks that cycle, and the other benefit to the city of Buffalo is you're returning parcels of land to the tax rolls. So housing is a huge part of it. Also is education. Education, I think, is if there's ever a panacea to most of our ills as a society, it's in our education system. We need to do a much better job as a city of supporting high-performing schools, whether they're charter schools, whether they're public schools, whether they're Catholic schools, whether they're private schools. As mayor, my job is to make sure that parents and residents have access to the highest performing schools available, a variety of options, and I include trade schools. That's another thing that gets off. It's given short shrift in our current education climate in this city is trade schools. Parents want and expect options for their kids, and being able to keep those young people engaged in schooling and setting themselves up for a lifetime of a career that they're passionate about is going to do almost as much as that new house, that ability to have an asset to pass down, the ability to have an education and to have a career moving forward. Those two things are how we're going to break the cycle of poverty.
All right, one more break before we wrap this all up. But first, a look at weekend traffic. City finances have dominated the headlines over the course of the last year. How will you fix budget gaps? Will you raise revenue? What's your strategy for fixing the finances of the city?
Sure. So the most frustrating part of this problem is we don't really know how bad it's going to be. We know it's bad, but until the audited numbers come in for last year's budget for the fiscal year ending in June of 25, we don't really know how large this budget deficit is going to be. So we're kind of flying in the dark to a certain extent. In my review of the budget, it appears that we're going to have at least a $50 to $60 million budget deficit. The first thing that jumps off the page of anybody who goes through that, who reads that budget, is that the city of Buffalo has a spending problem. From over the past 2 fiscal years that we have audited numbers for, expenses in the city of Buffalo have grown 30%. 30%. And the people who have done this, the mayor who saw this coming and the people on the Common Council who saw this coming, they knew the money was going to run out, and still expenses grew 30% over 2 years. Part of that growth over the past 2 years, so the last fiscal year, the one that ended, that we have numbers for in 2024, personnel costs went up 11%. We're anticipating that the personnel costs over the past budget that we don't have the numbers for went up another 5%. That's a 16% increase in personnel costs in 2 years. We have a spending problem. And which is why the first thing that we need to do is go in and address that side of the ledger. There is as you look at the city finances and the city budget, as mayor, what my jobs is going to be and how I'm going to approach this is the right sizing that needs to happen is basically divide things into wants and needs. Right now, the needs that I believe the city of Buffalo has are the essential services that people expect from City Hall. The things that you see, your police, fire, garbage collection, street paving, snow removal, the stuff that people, residents, taxpayers expect that the city is going to be able to do. That's the core function of City Hall. That's what I'm going to commit our resources to. Anything that falls outside of that core function is frankly a luxury that we can no longer afford.
Speaking of services, the city of Buffalo is known as a snow city, and we wear that with a badge of honor. We don't do necessarily a great job removing that. If you talk to anyone who lives on a side street in the city of Buffalo, what's your plan to improve that?
So I love this question because I get to use a comparison that I find instructive. The city of Buffalo has 1,600 lane miles to plow. 1,600 lane miles to plow for snow removal. The town of West Seneca has 240 lane miles to plow of snow. The city of Buffalo last year had 25 snow plows to cover 1,600 lane miles. The town of West Seneca had 16 snow plows to cover 240 lane miles. That's the problem. For the additional 1,300 lane miles of snow removal, the city of Buffalo had 10 extra trucks. I'm not a mathematician, but I know that doesn't work. This is a situation where, again, it's about what I mean by right sizing. It means we have to We have to trim where we don't need it, and we have to invest in the services that we do need, where we do need it. And when it comes to snow removal, what we desperately need is better and more equipment. And on top of that, we need to have the mechanics available who can work on the trucks to keep our dispatch rate high. And if you talk to the people who work over at the Broadway barns, they'll tell you that as soon as an opening happens in West Her or Northtown or one of the other dealerships around here, their mechanics are long gone because the city, for all of its benefits, right? We have a 42% benefit package that we offer city employees. Even with that, the starting salary for the mechanics that we need isn't enough to compete with those private businesses. We need to invest in that area. We need more snowplows. We need to keep the snowplows that we have operational. We're never going to be able to compete, lane for lane with Amherst or Hamburg or Orchard Park because we have city parking. We have street parking, I mean. Those jurisdictions, those municipalities, everybody, there's you can't park on the street. Everyone's got a driveway. Everyone's got a garage. That's easy. The city of Buffalo has its own unique challenges, but at a minimum, there needs to be an investment in the equipment that's going to be able to get us. It's inexcusable how bad it's become. I've lived here my whole life. It was never this bad. I don't ever remember a situation where the city of Buffalo had to throw up its hands and say, well, just wait a couple days and it'll melt, or depend on New York State, the Department of Transportation, or other municipalities from around the state to bail us out. It should be a point of pride for us in how we remove snow, and we can do it if we have the right management and the right resources.
Wrapping this up, what sets you apart from politics as usual? What about you or your policies should give voters in Buffalo hope about Buffalo's future?
Sure. I think the greatest thing that I bring to the table is that I'm not beholden to anyone. I don't owe my election to any group of private building developers, to labor unions, to some political machine that's going to hand me the keys to the second floor of City Hall. I don't owe anyone anything, which means I can go into the job and say, this is what needs to be done in order to make the city better, to improve, to make it more livable again. I don't care that that's Timmy's cousin who's always had that job, or Aunt Peggy who's always been employed by City Hall. Those days are over. We frankly can't afford them any longer. For too long, City Hall has operated as an employment agency. Just, yeah, we'll hire you, because whether you're related or you're politically connected, or that's how we're going to win this election, is hiring you. Those days have to be over. What we have to commit ourselves as a city to do, as City Hall to do, is get back in the service delivery business. That's what people want. That's what people expect. And they can trust that I'll do it because, as I said, I'm not going to owe my election to anyone. I'm going to be able to make the decisions, the very difficult decisions, with one person in mind, and that is the residents of the city of Buffalo.
That was our sit down with Republican candidate James Gardner. Now, we do have a full special with all three candidates streaming right now on WGRZ+. Actually, I lied. That begins tomorrow, October 18th. So be on the lookout for that. Before we wrap up the agenda, let's take a look at this week's Letters to Nate, featuring a fancy new intro that we started last week. I'm being told we have no letters this week. Well, that's certainly promising. Perhaps next week. Remember, you can send your emails to nathan.benson@wgrz.com or hit me up on Instagram @NateBensonReports. Next week on the agenda, we continue our series of Buffalo mayoral candidates featuring independent candidate Michael Gaynor. Politics is pro wrestling.
Yeah.
What's your pro wrestling finishing move, and what's that say about your political persona? Remember, the news never stops on WGRZ+. Thanks again for watching. I'm Nate Benson, and we'll see you at the next one.